I'm Randy McDaniels. I'm here today in front of Pew Hall, and the reason we're here today is because John Esposito, an Islamic apologist who's received over $20 million in funding from Saudi princes, is here as the keynote speaker for a new Islamic Studies Program at University of Florida GATORS. This is a man who's openly supported Hamas and Hezbollah. This is a man who's basically equated the cure to AIDS to violent jihad. And this is a man who has very radical ideology and is friends with and called convicted terrorist Sami al-Iran a consummate professional and a dear friend, just at the last CARE banquet here in April of this past year.
We are here today to protest John Esposito, the leading apologist for Wahhabi Islam. He repeatedly declares that depredations of the Islamic State stem from societal ills, not Islamic doctrine. Esposito argued last month at the National Press Club that, like Al-Qaeda, ISIS's transnational caliphate represented an extraordinarily violent brand of Islam and a warped and distorted Salafi ideology. He said the action of ISIS fly in the face of prescriptions in Islamic law against killing civilians and other atrocities. John Esposito is not telling us the truth. He says that the primary drivers for the Islamic State's violence are to be found elsewhere. That is, not in Islam, but in a long list of grievances. Raymond Abraham, a well-known, very well-publicized author, has a response to this outlandish claim. So in other words, and once again, it's apparently somehow our fault that Islamic State Muslims are behaving savagely, crucifying, beheading, enslaving, and massacring people only on the basis that they are infidels. So when the Islamic State herds and slaughters infidel and or Shia men while citing the example of the Prophet, that's because they're angry at something America did. When the Islamic State captures infidel Yazidi Christian and women and children and sells them on the slave market while citing Islamic teachings, that's because they're angry at something America did. When the Islamic State bombs churches, breaks their crosses, and tells Christians to convert or die while citing Islamic scriptures, that's because they're angry at something America did. Al-Qaeda and virtually every Islamist organization make it a point to insist that jihad is an Islamic obligation that has nothing to do with grievances. Consider Osama's own words in a letter to his fellow Saudis. Our talks with the infidel West and our conflict with them ultimately revolve around one issue, one that demands our total support, with power and determination, with one voice. And it is, does Islam, or does it not, force people by the power of the sword to submit to its authority corporeally, if not spiritually? Yes, there are only three choices in Islam. Either willing submission, payment of the jizya, or the sword. For it is not right to let him, which is an infidel, live. The matter is summed up for every person alive. Either submit or live under the suzerainty of Islam, or die. And that's from page 42 of the Al-Qaeda Reader. Conversion, submission, or the sword is, of course, the mission of the Islamic State, not alleviating grievances. Worst of all, unlike Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State from day one of its existence has made it very clear, in Osama bin Laden's words, with power and determination, with one voice, that its massacres, enslavements, crucifixions, and beheadings of infidels are all based on Islamic law, or Sharia, not silly grievances against the West. Unlike Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State is confident enough to avoid the grievance game and forthrightly asserts its hostility for humans based on their religious identity. Universities should be places of higher learning, not indoctrination. Students should be introduced as instructors who express support for terrorists or terrorism. Transparent policies regarding faculty, funding, and guest speakers in Islamic studies and other controversial programs should be available to the public. This university should adopt a policy which would ban any speaker who has been convicted of material support for terrorism as a co-conspirator in any terrorism-related court proceeding, or who has expressed support for the Muslim Brotherhood. And I have a question for this department. Will they allow teaching and texts about the nature of Islamic gender and religious apartheid and the history of Muslim colonization, imperialism, conversion via the sword, anti-black racism, and practice of slavery? And one other question. How exactly will they be describing ISIS, Hamas, the Muslim Brotherhood, Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and CARE?
What we want the American people to understand is that the Saudi government has funded Middle East studies programs at colleges and universities all across this country. Hundreds of millions of dollars flowing into universities so they can control the narrative, the message, and who the speakers are.